Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Taylor, and today we are doing another haunted history slash occult mystery video. I still don't have like a name for this like series that I'm doing, but I like the way haunted history and occult mysteries sounds. So we're gonna keep going with that. Anyways, today's video is on the Casket Girls of New Orleans. And clearly there's a New Orleans theme here because the first one was also from New Orleans, but I feel like there's so much history there, especially when it comes to the occult and just like haunted history in New Orleans. So there's just lots of stories. And today's story is one that I hadn't heard of until like earlier this year. And I think it's really interesting. Like, it's just, I don't know. I haven't really been able to stop thinking about it since I've heard of it. I did a little bit of research, and today we are going to be talking about the legend of the Casket Girls of New Orleans. This legend takes place back in New Orleans in 1728. As New Orleans was developing and growing as a city, the French sent over their unfavorable men to work and keep building into the city and honestly, like, colonizing it. These unfavorable men were prisoners, criminals, anyone that the government just like had a problem with, essentially. In order to keep the polished reputation that France had, they would send anyone that they like had a problem with or their criminals and prisoners to different countries around the world to kind of clean out their population, but also develop other areas of the world. The UK also did this with Australia, which I learned, which I thought was really cool. Or not cool, but interesting. They sent a lot of their prisoners, criminals, unfavorable people to Australia, and those were some of the original colonizers of Australia, which it's just so interesting to me. I didn't know that. One of the first buildings that got built in New Orleans was the Ursuline Convent on Charter Street. In 1721, the king sent over a group of nuns to help establish this convent and get it up and running. Founders of New Orleans were worried that they wouldn't be able to sustain the population without women. Mostly they had sent over only men, and the men were getting a little upset, you know? People have needs. So to rectify this, between 1719 and 1721, the French government sent over ships of women. Now, the men were not super happy with these women because they weren't very desirable, although eligible, weren't very desirable. A lot of them were prostitutes, some were beggars, they were homeless. And a lot of them were young girls taken from orphanages by force, and the men were not very happy with this. So, after the men complained, in 1728 they sent over a new ship of women, and this ship of women was apparently a lot better. But something that the men did notice about these women is they looked very sick and pale and kind of like just depleted. They also noticed that this group of women came with these really large trunks of their belongings that resembled coffins or caskets from that time period. These ladies became known as the Casket Girls because of how casket adjacent these wooden trunks looked, and they were so heavy. These women stayed in the Ursuline Convent, and this is where this legend begins to vary. Some say that they were locked in the attic or they stayed in the attic with all of their belongings while they stayed there, and other stories say that the women stayed on the floors below while their belongings were locked up in the attic. Either way, shortly after their arrival, a deadly and strange phenomenon swept through the city of New Orleans. Children were dying way faster, and so many men's bodies were found drained of blood. The authorities suspected these women, so they searched their trunks. They found that these trunks that were once heavy and apparently full of their belongings were empty and carried no trace of belongings to these women. This is where they began to believe that the women brought over vampires. They believed that these vampires would sneak out of these coffins in the attic at night, you know, pick out their victims and then come back before sunrise in the morning because, as we all know, apparently vampires cannot see the sun. After the nuns realized that these coffins were empty, they locked them up in the attic and sealed it with all the shutters drawn, and the Pope apparently blessed 800 nails, each individual nail that they used to seal up the attic. They did this so that the coffins were sealed up and so to prevent the vampires from returning to them, but we'll never actually know because to this day, the coffins and the attic are still sealed. Allegedly, back in 1987, the Pope at the time, Pope John Paul II, came and re-blessed all the nails in this convent. Many suspected that the women themselves were vampires, but also many others suspect that they did in fact smuggle vampires into New Orleans, and that is why the women look so sick. Did they have to continue to feed the vampires with their own blood during that long sail all the way from the UK just to keep them happy? A lot of people believe that they did smuggle vampires, and on the ship, in order to keep them happy, they had to feed from these women. Somewhere between 1970 and 1980, a group of paranormal investigators went to this convent to search for answers on the story or anything to do with their paranormal, and they hid in the courtyard of the convent. The next morning, though, they were all found scattered around the convent with their bodies drained of blood. Overall, it's hard to confirm any of these kinds of stories, of these legends, but because this story had such a deep root in the creation of the New Orleans that we know today, I feel like there's got to be some semblance of realness in it, just because it's so shocking. And honestly, at this point, I'm not surprised by anything. If they really did smuggle vampires, I would not be surprised. I think that that's really crazy. So it's also obvious that this is where the vampires of New Orleans kind of originated, because they believe that these women kept bringing vampires over from the UK. And so this is kind of like a prequel to the Vampire Brothers, the Carter brothers of my last video. And yeah, what do you think? I think that there's definitely something there in this story. I have no clue if the entire thing is what really happened, but this is what I found based on research. The story is pretty consistent the whole way through. Again, some people believe that the women stayed in the attic with their belongings. Some believed only that belongings were in the attic. We really are not sure, and we'll never find out because the attic has been completely sealed and has been sealed for like over 100 years, like 200 years. So yeah, that's the story of the Casket Girls. I hope you guys enjoyed this little legend. If you have any other ideas, please let me know, because these videos are kind of hard to find ideas since things that have to do with the occult and stuff are often spread with misinformation and just not widely talked about for obvious reasons. So if you have any other ideas, please let me know. I am still researching the Nena Fenario case, but that one's taking me a long time because there's a lot of misinformation about her. And I just want to make sure that I get like the real information. I don't want to just be like spreading and feeding into the misinformation. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.